And good afternoon. Here we are in China. It's 5 p.m., so maybe an early evening. And I just want to welcome Harald back to the channel. Harald has lived in China for 19 years, it says so there. And are you actually living in Shanghai, Harald? Is that right?
Yes, and to the 19 years, maybe to clarify, I've come the first time to China 19 years ago. I've since visited every year and have been living here really since 2014, but several months already before that in 2006 and several months in 2012. And I'm currently in Shanghai for the last 3 years. I have been in Beijing before for about 8 years. So, yeah.
And I'd have to say you're one of the most colorful of my guests with your shirts and your glasses. It's always nice to see what you're going to turn up wearing. Yeah. So first of all, we're going to talk today about the trade, the tariffs, a couple of other things that we're going to talk about. But I wanted to start with, I understand that you were recently at an Xpeng launch. Now, anybody who doesn't know Xpeng, I have a kind of favorite car, and then I have another favorite car, and then I have another favorite car. And every time I see a car, I go, that's my favorite car. And it's always either an Xpeng or a Xiaomi. And I honestly, Xpeng or Xiaopeng are really, really beautiful cars. But you just went to one of their launches. Tell us a little about that. First of all, tell us, why did you get an invite to a Xiaopeng launch?
Right. So full disclosure, one, I actually drive NIO myself, and I'm very happy with it. So I drive a NIO ES6, which is another Chinese brand for those who don't know them. So I'm not here to make ads for Xiaopeng, nor did they ask me. But equally full disclosure, they did invite me to go to Hong Kong. They didn't pay me. I'm not big enough for that. But they just reached out to me on Twitter. They said, we like your stuff, and why don't you come? And I said, well, I'd love to. Awesome. So that's how I went there. And I have to agree, like, their cars are getting better and better. Like 2 years ago, when I thought about which brand, I felt that they were not quite up to NIO in just terms quality feeling that they gave me. And but now what they've launched is the X9. It's like a MPV, a 7-seater large car, super luxury, super like high tech, super comfortable, like family car, but also really good looking, like a really pretty car.
What I should have done is got a couple of pictures of Xpeng, but I didn't. I know that you were there, and it didn't occur to me to not get some pictures of it until you just said how beautiful they are. They are actually, I think, probably the best looking car on Chinese roads. They're just called Xpeng, but they're Xiaopeng is their correct name. But they're not just cars, are they? There's another picture I want to show here, which is one of your pictures from the Xpeng show. Tell us about this.
And really, this is another very big takeaway for me from this whole event is the flying car concept. I mean, I've heard a little tiny bit about it, but to really see it. So this is like a drone for 2 people. You can fly about 20 minutes with it, and it can lift up 2 people. And they claim you can learn in 3 minutes how to fly it. It's super simple. And so the ad that went viral a few weeks, I'd say, or months ago was you buy a car, you get a helicopter for free, or you get an airplane for free. And so it comes with this, what they call mothership. It's like a 6-wheel, huge, like truck, like a kind of like an MPV, but the back of it is just transporting this helicopter, this eVTOL, how they call it.
Vertical takeoff and landing, yeah.
Right.
Is it? I mean, do you need a special license to drive this thing?
See, now that's one thing that is still a bit in the open, because it depends on the legislation everywhere. And I think from what I hear is China is currently very much working on this, what they call like low altitude economy. So that includes like drone flying for video shooting, drones for transportation, like in future to have like DD or not DD, what's it called? Like the JD or the like just the
Meituan and
packages,
those kinds of
right?
things.
Food deliveries, these kind of things sent by drones. And then also drones or like flying taxis or just like these flying objects that can carry people. It's all in the process of getting legislated, and it depends where. Obviously, I asked them and they didn't have a proper answer, to be honest, like how they imagine a big city like Shanghai, like Beijing, like a place that's really packed with people with high population density. If 10,000 people have a car like this and have this drone taxi in it and start taking off when there's a traffic jam or like that, the sky would be black from drones flying around. And the only thing they said from a product perspective was, one day perhaps if they can replace the propeller with different flying technologies, then it would be less noisy and less wind underneath it.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't really answer my question about the skies turning black from, several layers of drones. Kind of the Fifth Element comes to mind, these kind of science fiction pictures.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if we think of China, places like Sichuan, if you could fly over the mountains, in Switzerland, if you can go heli skiing by yourself, just fly up, let the drone fly down by itself to the mothership. I mean, these kind of use cases. In the Middle East, I completely can see it to replace the Land Rovers, to just have, the rich people drive these kind of things. And
there's actually some countries in the Middle East buying not this particular model, but a bigger model, 4-seater model for airborne taxis already. That's already happening.
Exactly. And in such a place, I can absolutely see rich people prefer to have their private ones and go with this. And now I'm not well prepared. I recall the price is somewhat 300,000, but I'm actually not quite sure if that's correct. Like
it's a lot of money when you think about a 20-minute joyride, which is basically what it is at the moment. But I think that'll change. It'll get better. And you mentioned the low altitude economy, that this is a very, very important part of the future. I think one of the experiences that I found is that in China, there has been a lot of problems with the lack of capital for each city from the property development, and the way that the property, it's not a property crash, it's a controlled demolition. But effectively now what's happening is many cities are selling their airspace. Basically, if I want to fly my drone, I can go to my local council and I can buy a license to fly my drone. I can just fly it anyway at the moment, but this is what they're talking about in the future. So you're flying a drone and you have to pay for the privilege of using that airspace. Now, I don't know how that's going to work, whether you have a license fee for a year, whether you have a fee per use. That's all up in the air, but it is actually the future of the economy of some major cities, where they're going to sell their airspace. And I think some of those even advertising, as well as, of course, delivery routes or routes if you're an American. Yeah.
Right. So just 2-3 points to that. So I've just checked the price. Indeed, it's $280,000. That's what I see.
Whoa.
And so around 300,000. And obviously, I mean, you can recharge it. So the flights are at the moment very short, but they say with one mothership load, it has enough power to recharge 6 times. So if you want to drive the mothership to a place as well, maybe you can recharge it 3 times and then drive back home or something like that.
Yeah.
And as you said, I mean, the important part is this is a first prototype that gets sold. So it's like the first mass-produced prototype, but it's still an early stage of flying cars. So, and it just reminds me of the very important lesson that I've learned working at VW 10 years ago, where, the engine developers, the engineers for the car engine, gasoline engine and diesel engines, they would laugh at the notion of China trying to get all cars to electric. They were like, that's so stupid. They go fixed on one technology, and of all technologies on the electric battery cars, which is not going to come. That's just a temporary solution until the hydrogen cars will be ready, and nobody wants to wait for recharging cars and all these things. And now we're here. I drive an electric car for almost 2 years. I've not regretted it once. And the recharging is not an issue because you just recharge overnight. And I think more and more Chinese now, more than half of the new sold cars in China are electric. Everybody understands that this was the correct decision at the time. And VW, which rejected it, is now struggling. And as it happens, they've bought the stake in Xpeng, trying to learn from Xpeng because they have better battery tech. They have better understanding of how to sell electric cars to customers, the customer service, the logistics, the safety measures, the emergency recharging if somebody does get stuck in the road without energy, or all these things. Xpeng has the experience, VW does not. Yeah. And so the same thing. I don't really see these flying cars yet, but I would not be as arrogant to claim, because I don't quite see the use case, that it means there is no use case and there will not be with future technology iterations.
Well, we can already catch one of these, not this particular model, but something like this, from here to Hong Kong, from here to Shenzhen Airport, from here to Guangzhou Airport. That's already in existence. They're not helicopters, they are drones, and you get in them and they don't have a driver, I don't think. And I mean, I can't afford to do it, so it doesn't matter. But yeah, somebody, Kevin just mentions it would be great to see the Gigafactory. I'm living in Guangdong province. I'll put feelers out and see if I can get to see it. And Speaking Truth asks a question here. This is we've got a little sluggish here. I'm trying to click on this. Here we go. The FSD, that's the full self-driving chip. I saw a post on Twitter that Elon Musk has been saying since 2014 that full self-driving will be available next year, or will be available later this year. And they showed him saying this in 2014, 2015, 2016, and even as late as 2024. It will be here by the end of the year. It's not here yet. I was in a car yesterday. Honestly, don't know what brand it was, but the guy just flicked a button and then started. He was like this. He was driving like this. He's on his phone, and I'm looking at, what are you doing? And he's the car's driving, but fully self-driving car in China. Is that common?
So I don't think you're supposed to look at your phone while it's self-driving, but you can indeed drive. The car can drive itself. So same, my Neo does drive itself on the highway. And oddly, I had like 1 week where it was open all throughout Shanghai, including small roads. I don't know if they just did a test and then locked it again, or if I did something that it got locked for me again. It didn't feel very well, to be honest, in Neo, and they're known to be not the very best in terms of self-driving. From what I hear is the best indeed are Xpeng and the Xiaomi. And the Avatar, like the Huawei car. These three are known to be excellent self-driving cars, including on the small roads, including, with the super weird traffic in China with motorbikes and pedestrians and bicycles and everything crisscrossing. They're still very capable to handle that traffic, and also handle the traffic of pushing into full lanes, where you just have to take a little corner, push your corner of the car inside that traffic.
The way Chinese drivers drive.
The other one, you just push yourself in slowly. And they're actually able to do that, these self-driving cars. So yes, that's possible. Tesla also, they have this FSD. I think in the US, it works really well. In China, it doesn't work well. And legally speaking, in China, you still have to watch traffic because you're just legally fully responsible. So if your self-driving car does something, then it's your fault as a driver, even if the car was in self-driving mode, which is good. I mean, we're definitely too far away from a point where the car company can be in charge of mistakes. Right.
There was a death, a fatality a couple of weeks ago. I think it was 3 girls driving a Xiaomi at 120 kilometers an hour, and the car got involved in something and people died. And of course, that's not a reflection on either the girls or the car. That's just these things are going to happen. But I think when everything is self-drive, they'd happen less. I think that's probably the truth.
Sure. In fact, somebody asked at the press conference, of course, had to be the German. A German journalist asked about that accident of the Xiaomi car, and everybody was a bit baffled because obviously the answer from Xpeng was, "This is not an Xpeng car. We are not going to talk about a case of another car brand." Which we don't have any insights, and same for me. I just know that this accident happened, but I have no idea. Was it really self-driving? Were they pushing on the accelerator? No idea. So for me,
the report I read was that the lady driver intervened when the car was taking evasive action, which would probably do it. It's probably better if you can't touch the wheel.
See, I don't want to speculate because I don't know the details. What I do know is, yes, people have died in self-driving cars. And famously, the first one died in a Tesla, which didn't recognize, I think, a big white truck because it was white and it just didn't distinguish it from the sky. And it just drove into it a few years back. Back then, that was a big headline because it was the first case. And I'm sure some cases, that was in the US, I think. It wasn't in China. And so it happens. It does happen, but in fact, it happens much less than manual drivers driving in other people and killing themselves or others. So it's a very tricky topic. I think it's hard to cover in this live stream because the question of who's responsible and how many deaths are acceptable when we compare it to manual driving, which obviously has frequent deaths in traffic as well, sadly. But then again, you don't want to allow a technology which causes deaths. So it's a very tricky question.
I would hope. I know China is working on the mobile generation 6, and I think probably when we're all currently working, everything's on 5, and when it goes to 6. I think possibly that will be the time they can say, well, we can let cars do this. But then there's going to be a transition period when some cars don't have the capacity to do it. Right. That's a good question here from Dark Sun. Can you still call it driving when you're in an L4? The answer is no, I don't think you are. There are taxis in Guangzhou now, which you can catch, which don't have drivers. You come up alongside of a taxi and you see 2 passengers sitting in the back and there's no one in the front. And they're in totally autonomous taxis in certain areas. So yeah, it's not really driving, is it?
Yeah, and maybe 2 points more. Before there was a question about the FSD chip, specifically of Xiaopeng. And yes, what they did reveal at the press conference last week was that end of this year, they plan to have their own chips in all their cars, like all the lineups. So that's a big step. And a few car companies have managed to do both cars and microchips. Sad, it pains me as a NIO driver to say that NIO has very early announced they want to do their own chips and have not managed successfully to do that. And they have had huge cost, and cost is a big issue for NIO at the moment. I hope they survive because they're really a beautiful brand as well. Xpeng has always focused on being tech leader, so they have very advanced technology. And same here, I'm also very pro Xpeng. I hope they survive because it's a brutal competition. But the Q1 numbers for Xpeng are fantastic. So they had like 300% growth. So meaning
there's
they're
a lot of them on the road. The other thing
they
about
grew like Xpeng 3 times compared to last year. So massive sales growth for their cars. And we're with this picture, good point. But they also introduced, besides flying cars and the X9 MPV, was their explorations in humanoid robots. They started with a robot dog, but then they said, we don't want to do toys. We want to do something that's useful. And so they focused on humanoid robots. And I don't think they're on sale yet. No, they said they're not selling yet. They really want to have a product that's helpful and useful and has a use case until they start selling. So they don't want to just put it out there because it can walk and dance, which is a strategy. I think in the long term, it's good for a brand to focus on something and to have purpose. And already they didn't show it. I think they said they will show it within the next months, they will show like real examples. At that event, they only had the presentation of it and showed some video in which it does look very good already in terms of walking. It just shows again how much, bluster is in the stock price of a Tesla when they say like, oh, Tesla will produce humanoid robots that will replace all the factory workers. And that's how Tesla is worth so much more than the next 10 car companies combined, because Tesla will just take over the entire industry. Industry as a whole will be taken over by Tesla robots. No, it won't, because there's Unitree obviously in China, which has probably the most advanced humanoid robots. There's Xpeng, which has very, very strong research in humanoid robots, and I'm sure there's a ton of other companies who already have quite advanced prototypes as well.
Yeah, I've seen a few. There was an interesting activity today in it was in Beijing. In Beijing, there was the first ever half marathon involving humans and robots racing together. I think there was a degree of separation, but it was interesting that this was happening today in Beijing, in China, and we started talking about threats to American business. I would say that China's advances on here are a serious threat.
Sure.
Speaking the truth, just put up another, not that one, sorry, this one. They're moving fast, this one. What happens if any of these companies go bust? Now, I'm going to guess that there is not much you can do about this, except buy with confidence and hope your optimism was valid. Because when companies go bust anywhere, there's very little, unless they go into administration and get acquired by somebody else, then there's very little support.
So there's one luxury brand called Hi-Fi. They did go bankrupt, and I think, it's an issue because you don't get service anymore. And what I do think with the big ones, Xpeng, Li Xiang, and hopefully also NIO, I think they've already established their brand enough that they're unlikely to go bankrupt. I don't think they will. If they really run out of money, what will happen is probably that one of the large car companies, possibly even one of the Chinese state-owned car companies, will just take them over and run them as a brand. Like how you can still buy a Citroen or an Opel or Vauxhall or whatever, lots of British brands. You can still buy a Rolls-Royce, even though it's not an independent car brand long ago. It's owned by BMW. So all the car brands that went bankrupt, if they had a good brand, if they had a fan base, they would just get bought by another brand and continue to sell.
I think that's going to be the case.
It's good for the users, definitely. I mean, why not? And it's also good for the established big brands like a VW. They're huge. They have a supply chain around the world. They have all the logistics for spare parts around the world, which is a hugely complex thing. It's not as easy as people may think. Just send a ship and the cars will be there. Like how do you send all the spare parts in the right quantities through all the custom regulations of all countries around the world? That's hugely complicated. And these established brands have this capability. Also a Nissan, which is about to go bankrupt, or a Toyota or a Honda, or all these brands have these capabilities. So it can make sense to work together with a very innovative brand that has a very strong brand, a very strong product, but does not have this scale and logistics globally. So I think there's a lot of synergies that can happen if any of those get in trouble.
You also had a brush with fame while you were there. But another picture here. Who's this?
I think there's three people. Funny that you call fame this guy. I mean, yes, he's probably the most well-known influencer that I've met, the Electric Viking, Sam Evans. Yeah. And I was stoked to meet him because I watch his program really a lot. I think he does a great job promoting electric cars. And he's like inadvertently pro-China, like he keeps saying that he doesn't do it because of China, but because of the electric cars, which out of China, just simply the best electric cars and most innovative changes happen. He recently has started joking about how much he gets paid by the communists for, like all these things. And I told him, like, don't let them get at you. People tell you that you're paid by the communists and stuff like that, because if you make the jokes too often, it gets annoying for people who didn't even think about that. So I think, but I just totally understand him, like it gets at you when there's always people saying, oh, you're paid by the CCP. It's just annoying after a while. Yeah, he's from Australia.
I know.
The other one is a YouTuber as well. I'm sorry, I forget his name, but
sorry, go back to that one. Yeah,
he's also a YouTuber, and I think they're both from Australia. I know Sam Evans is from Australia, and he's huge, by the way. Like, he looks big in the live streams, but in real person, like, he's just muscle and like a surfer and bodybuilder and YouTuber, and just a very impressive guy. I have to say, like, to meet him live was quite impressive. He just has like this aura of like, here I am, the Viking. Like, he's really a Viking.
He's definitely Viking-ish. I wouldn't want to come up against him in a shield wall, that's for sure. Coming from the north of England, where the Vikings pillaged and raped my great grandmothers, I would not want to come up against
ancestors.
That was a long time ago. There's somebody else. This is a very famous lady, but I don't know her name.
Yes, so she could also have Viking ancestors. Now looking at her. So she's her name's Ashley Dudarok. I butcher her last name, but she's very famous on LinkedIn. She's much more 2B. So B2B offers connections between like top level tech companies in the West to Chinese tech leaders. And she's very well connected. So Ashley, she's on LinkedIn, very prolific and popular because she has great content on Chinese tech developments as well.
Okay, cool. So let's move on from your. I think people thought that was the Canton Fair, which is going on right now. The Canton Fair is going on, but that was in Hong Kong, wasn't it?
Yes, so it was in Hong Kong at a pier. It was a very interesting location. They did Hong Kong because they wanted to have like this international flair to it, and it's the launch event for X9, the Xpeng. It was a dedicated event by the brand Xpeng, Xiaopeng. Okay. And yes, the wife of Sam Evans, indeed, he mentions on his channel that she has cancer. Not he doesn't, but she does. And so, yeah, I've heard that as well. But we didn't talk about that. It wasn't a venue to talk about this.
No, of course
I think I wouldn't tell these private things on a channel, to be honest. But it's his choice. And again, he's a great guy.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on, because we wanted to talk a little bit about. We're supposed to be talking about threats to China, threats to America from Chinese industry, Chinese trade. And Jensen Huang has been in China the last couple of days. For people who don't know who he is, he's the CEO of Nvidia. What's he doing in China?
Do we have one more picture before? I think we still had Wang Tan, just to not skip him. Is
that this guy? Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So people may not know him, but he's actually probably the most influential of them all. Like, he's not an influencer. The biggest influencer was Eva de Keci Chonghuo. So she's a Chinese influencer with 2 million followers. But he's the guy who develops the flying cars. So he's actually, so his name is Wang Tan, and he's the chief designer of the, what's it called? Aero HP. So that's the name of the sub-brand of Xiaopeng. So I was very excited to meet him as well. So there were some really high-level people. The CEO of Xiaopeng, Mr. Xiaopeng himself, He Xiaopeng, was also present, but I couldn't get a selfie with him. Like, he was surrounded by all the journalists, hundreds of people. So, yeah.
He actually looks like a good friend of mine in Guangzhou, without the little beard. But I have a friend who looks very much like him. His name is Alvin. He's works for Guangdong Television. So if anyone's watching from Guangdong Television, point this out to Alvin. He looks like Alvin.
Yeah, and he is a friend of everyone. Like, he's a very friendly, open person. As the CEO, He Xiaopeng, as well. Like, he feels very interested in people and very easy to talk to. Not like this, like above everybody else, big corporate CEO. Like, no, he's a very nice guy. And yes, Dudarenok, I think that's Ashley's last name. So
someone put that up. Yeah, and she is influential. She's more on LinkedIn than other social medias. Very business focused.
Okay, Jensen Huang.
Jensen Huang. Apparently, this was a fruitless trip to China because the US forbids him to sell his chips. The US does not forbid him to sell chips. It forbids him to sell a certain level of chips, but chips are still being sold and made, and investments in China too.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, the US does go down step by step in terms of level of tech that they're still allowed to sell to China. Originally, they said just the top notch is not allowed to sell. Then came DeepSeek, said, look, we can use older chips and achieve even higher quality of AI, artificial intelligence as well. And then they said, all right, the next level is not allowed to sell anymore either. So, but all the more, I mean, Jensen Huang knew this before he went to Beijing. So I think this is all the more interesting and exciting that he does visit Beijing, and he doesn't visit Guangdong or Shenzhen, where maybe his customers were. He visits Beijing. So I think this is a very powerful sign. And I mean, I don't know enough about Nvidia regarding how much he is involved in the still up to date latest development of what they do, and also how much they depend on input materials, like TSMC, that fully relies on a Dutch company to provide them with the machines to produce the chips. But he can always choose to go to China. Like, people shouldn't say that he's bound to stay in the US forever and thus can never sell to China. I mean, many people say, I've had enough of the US and all the restrictions I get there. China offers me huge deals. Why not a Jensen Huang saying, look, I take my core team of developers and engineers and I move to somewhere in China where I get a huge bonus from the Chinese government for supporting the development of China. I'm sure China would pay a lot of money for him to do that.
He was videoed coming out of a meeting. Sorry, just finish this one because. Go on. You go.
I just saw this Hammer 8 comment regarding the Ascent chip from Huawei, which I think is a very good point. I mean, Jensen also knows he's on a schedule. If he does not keep the ability to sell and keep his good customers in China, then at one point he will be replaced. And I'm sure he's smart enough to know that. Maybe politicians in the US don't know this, but he definitely knows that the Chinese Chinese company.
He came out of a meeting and was asked by a journalist what's happening with Nvidia. I don't know if the question, I didn't hear the question, are you pulling out of China? His response was all I saw, because it was an out of context response on a video on X. And basically he said, we've been here for 30 years, we're not moving away, and we will be here for 10 more years. Now, the poster who put it up there said they've been here 30, they'll be here 30 more. I think that's probably closer to the truth, but he did say that quite categorically. We've been here 30 years. We're not moving now. We're going to be here for the next 10 years. So that's the CEO of Nvidia saying he did not think that his trip was a wasted trip, and he did not think that he was, basically he didn't think that his business was over in China. So that's what, I mean, we don't know what happened inside the meetings, but we get a good idea.
I love your followers. Like here, I just read that AMC founder renounced his U.S. citizenship to become a Chinese citizen. I mean, you have people following your live streams who are very well informed. It's very interesting.
I didn't know that either.
Read all these comments.
Well, the thing about Jensen Huang is that he's Chinese, but he's Taiwanese. They call him a Taiwanese citizen. On Wikipedia, he's listed as his country is Taiwan, which of course is the Wikipedia way of, don't take it too seriously. It's Wikipedia's way of saying we're going to try and influence people into thinking Taiwan is a country when it's a province of China, and the rest of the world kind of knows.
And more Taiwanese, I think, just right now are rediscovering their Chinese roots if they've never thought about it, because the way Taiwan has been treated, which has always given everything it can to the US and now still got slapped tariffs on it. I think a lot of Taiwanese just realized that there will always just be the little dog, to not use a more ugly word, of the US. They're a poodle, and they're not a partner. And anyone who thinks they're a partner of the US, they're just a chump. Same for Europeans as well. I mean, it's just now become so obvious. But I think for Taiwanese, it's much easier to think of an alternative to just say, well, you know, we're Taiwanese in the province of Taiwan, like Shanghainese in the province of Shanghai or in the city of Shanghai. And to just say, if you don't like us in the US, then we always have another partner on the other side, whereas Europe is kind of lost at the moment where to go.
Yeah, Europe is a little bit of a lost cause, and that will settle down, I'm sure. But right now, Taiwan is very much getting kicked in the teeth by America, but perhaps not so much as their old friend Japan. This was an interesting one. American extortionists, that video.
Yes, and I mean, the Taiwanese look a lot to Japan because some of them were collaborators with the Japanese during the occupation period, and others just feel that they're both so-called allies of the US. So there's definitely a look towards Japan. And as you said, Japan also got treated very badly by the US, slapped tariffs, even though they've always complied with all the demands from the US. They have sent now a delegation to the US. I think it was the PM personally, or a high-level delegation that went to the US to talk to Trump's team to get rid of the tariffs. And apparently they've left without a agreement. Yes,
according to the Financial Times, yes.
Which is a heavy thing. Again, if you think what Japan has always done, bending over backwards to please the US and sacrifice good relations in East Asia to make the US happy. And now they not only get tariffs on their products, which for Japan, again, the US is also a very important export market, with the car industry struggling, the Japanese cars in China. This time it's not about political tensions between Japan and China. This time it's really about the Japanese lacking good electric cars. The US market still likes gasoline cars, so the Japanese would love to sell to the US. And now with these tariffs, that's heavy for Japan.
Well, that's the other thing. That most cars that are made in the US are not American cars, they're Japanese cars. The Hondas and Toyotas that are being made in the US they're pretty good cars. They're made in the USA. And they're not getting tariffed because they're made in the USA. So Japan has already gone to all this trouble to placate America, to please America. And it didn't just get kicked in the teeth. It got kicked in the teeth. And then while it was down, it got kicked in the head again. It got kicked in the teeth in the 1980s with the Plaza Accord, where they were the second highest economy in the world. And America just said, "Oh no, we can't have this." So they took their Toshibas out and hit them with sledgehammers. And that's a very famous video from a long time ago, around about the 1980s, where American senators said exactly what they're saying about China now.
Right.
Why would they do that?
Right. And the other link that the other picture that you just showed before, this is, so his name is Shinji Oguma, is a Japanese member of parliament, I think, opposition lawmaker. And so there's this video by the Times of India published. I think there's other sources as well. There's an English version on TikTok, which is AI translated, which really looks like a fake video. I rely on Bertrand Arnault on Twitter, who forwarded it, and he said, well, it's just a translation that makes it look that even the face, lips moving, is adjusted by AI, which is really stupid because it makes the whole video look like a fake. But what he said here, and Times of India posts the original Japanese language with English translation, and I've seen people claiming to be Japanese saying that translations are correct, is what everybody knows and what everybody thinks, right? That the US is currently doing extortion. They're saying, give us money. We have military bases everywhere that costs a lot for us, and we protect you with those. And in order for us to protect you, you have to give us more money. And if you ask, what do you protect us from? Then pure mafia style, it's, well, find out. If you don't pay, we do color revolution. We pay armed opposition in your country. We destroy your country with our military. We basically really destroy you if you don't pay us. And in the case of Japan, maybe not militarily, but economically, it's just, we did nothing wrong. Now the US comes and says, unless you pay, we're just going to wreck you.
And they already have effectively wrecked the economy of, or, if not wrecked it, they certainly held it in rein, which is what they're trying to do to China. The other thing is that many people would argue that parts of Japan, which may or may not be decided to be parts of Japan, the Okinawa, the Ryukyu Islands, these are already occupied by America. So they are paying mafia style for protection.
Yeah. Yeah.
And who are they? Hang on, somebody's just put this: China as a threat to humanity. What a great one! I'm assuming Nasty Badger is being sarcastic there, because if it's not, I'll remove.
Yeah, he's calling you Mr. Clueless. I think he's
okay.
just like some.
So I just put him in timeout for a few minutes. Maybe he'll
because
go
the
away.
thing is, some people deliberately want to get you angry so that you also change your tone to more aggressive, which is not conducive to
those people who follow me probably know I do not get angry very often. What I do is I kind of get even when it actually incentivizes me and motivates me when people get rude about me. And it's not a big deal to me. If someone wants to be rude, I'll give them a response. Then quite often when they've made a comment, my response becomes my next video. So yeah, that's how it works for me. Let's move on from the discussion. Well, before we do, Indonesia is another one. They capitulated immediately. They were one of what Trump calls his 70 countries that were. Let me just remove this one. There were 70 countries apparently begging for deals and kissing his ass. Which I think was possibly the rudest thing you could possibly say when you're talking about heads of states. And I think at the time he said 50 of them, 50 countries calling me up and say, hey, Mr. President, what can we do? We want to make a deal. They're kissing my ass. Now, of course, what that did was it said to just about every single one of them, where's my respect? We'll come back to the respect question in a little while. Indonesia was one country that said, okay, we agree to buy from you an extra, I can't remember, billions of dollars worth of gear.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And he's just slapped them with a 47% tariff. What's going on?
Yeah. And maybe I want to highlight Andrew Hanna's comment, which is it's time for countries to collaborate with their neighbors. And I think
I put that up for a little while there.
Right. Yeah. I think that's really such a good comment that's worth highlighting. And right now, Xi Jinping has traveled to Vietnam and Cambodia. Is it Cambodia? No.
Yep.
Vietnam
and Malaysia.
And Malaysia. Cambodia and Malaysia, all three of them. Right. And so that's exactly what they are doing. And this is quite big because these countries, especially Vietnam, they've had always tensions with China as well. But they're saying, like, in this case, it's good to have relations with the US if the US is willing, but China is the neighbor, and party-to-party exchange makes communication at least relatively easy. And the welcome in Malaysia was just huge. Like they're really celebrating Xi Jinping right now because by comparison, China is really the friendly neighbor, and Trump makes sure that everybody feels disrespected. And Trump said 70 countries came to them. I doubt, honestly, I have doubts. Like Japan, Indonesia, maybe 2-3 Latin American ones, but really which countries? The EU didn't come. The EU was ready to do counter tariffs just before the US said they reduce back to 10% tariffs. So the EU countries, I don't think they came to the US. So which countries? 70 countries. I really have my doubts. I think he's just talking. Same with Xi Jinping called him. Did he? No, I don't think so.
No, I think he straight out lied about that. I don't think because he immediately backpedaled and said, "I'm not going to talk about that now." But yeah, he straight out lied. So we're talking. And when someone asked the question, he said, "I'm not going to talk about that." So I believe that he was lying. That was an indication of someone who realized he'd said too much.
Right. Yeah, I think so. And he's trying to look for ways out, I think, like trying to somehow backpedal. And so, claiming, the Chinese caved, and that's why we reduce their tariffs as well. Because, I mean, the clock is ticking. If you cannot reduce the tariffs within 2 months, shelves are going to be empty in the US, or things are just going to be much more expensive.
I don't think that's going to take 2 months.
Maybe even less. Yeah, we'll see.
I have friends. Zhongshan is a big shipping port. I have friends who work in shipping, and one friend just a week ago, and I put this out in a video that I'd made. He told me that a month ago he was sending 100 containers a week. He's down to 4 a week going to America right now. Now that is an indication that it's not going to take 2 months to empty the shelves out. Now, we're also seeing on TikTok, lots and lots of people on TikTok. If anybody watches TikTok, there are lots of people who are saying, I'm a small business person. I've got 2 containers that came in last week. They want $34,000 for me before they release it. I have to pay it. This is not China paying any tariffs. It's not costing China a cent.
Yeah.
This is people in America who are forced just to get the products they've already paid for off the dock, the cost of the product again, plus some.
Yeah. And yesterday, yet another 100%. So it's now at 245%.
Yeah.
It's insane.
And
yet there's still there's still products which can be sold. So I've seen one viral TikTok video of a guy angry at his plastic sneakers, for which he paid like $450, and they're sold like production cost less than $1. So
I couldn't help myself but make a comment on that one. I reposted that one. I hope he went viral. My comment was, this is hilarious for 2 different reasons. One is that Americans are just finding out what the margins really are, and the other is that some fool paid $450 for this. They cost $4, 4 RMB, 6 RMB, or something like that. And I think I probably these are high quality. I think I probably paid 20 RMB for these, or my wife did.
Right.
That's it. I'm never very well dressed when I'm at home. We call these shower slippers. They cost 20 RMB or 30 RMB for the good quality ones. Someone paid $450 for a pair of slippers.
Insane. So you can easily add them 300% tariffs. That's fair. Why not give something to the government if you have that kind of money lying around?
If you've got that much margin, well, that's the other thing, because those very rich companies, they're the corporations that are not paying the tax. Yeah. Trump has hit the wrong target here. I mean, if he really wants to make his the groundswell of public opinion go into his favor, he's got to start hitting corporations like Apple and Tesla and those kinds of corporations. And of course, you scrap the military-industrial complex. But of course, none of those things are going to happen. There will need to be revolutionary change. And I mean that in the true sense of the word. It needs to go 180 degrees round and be entirely different, and maybe scrap the Constitution, put it in a museum somewhere and leave it there and say, this is how we used to do things. Let's talk about respect. J.D. Vance did something that I think he thought he was insulting people, but he actually said, we're borrowing money from peasants to buy products that peasants make. What do you think Chinese people think about that?
So honestly, at first, I'm very, very surprised he does say such a thing, because he prides himself to come from a very poor place. He's not ashamed of it, which I thought was very nice. I actually liked him for that before he came to power. I thought it's interesting to see, a bit like Xi Jinping comes or has lived in very poor places. He grew up in a very poor place. You'd think he'd be sympathetic to poor people and really put his back into working for them. And now he uses peasants as a slur kind of thing. And how do Chinese respond? I mean, I feel Chinese society is so diverse. We also need to stop talking about the Chinese say this and that, because I know some Chinese who have escaped poverty, maybe 2nd, 3rd generation citizens, and they really, really pride themselves not to be peasants, because peasant does have a connotation of having low education in China. There's not these highly educated agronomists who studied agriculture, but they're more like the hardworking people who cannot do anything else. They can just work the fields. Mm-hmm. And so I feel that some felt very insulted. On the other hand, I think you have a different take. You think peasant is actually also a positive word in Chinese, which I also agree on.
Yeah. It was Mao made that so. It was the peasant, and he described them. Now, I'm not sure if this was an English translation, because Mao didn't speak English, but if it was an English translation that we, the colonials, put onto Mao's words, he may have said the agricultural workers, and it gets changed into peasants. But the fact is, from that time on, we're going back to 1947, 1946, it was a peasant army. It was a farmer's army. A lot of them were just armed with farming tools. And this military took the country back. So, yeah, there's a lot of positive connotations, I think.
So, but I think we need to also think about what was the status of China at the time. Back then, people really were uneducated, and there were 80-90% farmers, people living in villages. And of course, there's been the big movement of sending intellectuals to the countryside to learn from the farmers. And the point was, pure theory is worthless. Learn first where your food comes from, and learn how the hard work in the countryside looks like. And once you know that, then maybe you can use your theory to help them and improve the conditions. But don't sit in the cities and talk about how to improve the country without knowing the poverty outside of the cities. And I approve very much of that movement as such. And I think there's been a bit of a backsliding, like there's a big mix. As I said, I don't want to speak for the Chinese because it's such a huge mix. And some Chinese, I've seen the comment, some are proud to be descendants of peasants. Or like my wife, she's born in a farm village and went to university, to Renmin University, one of the really good ones in Beijing. Impressive. And she wouldn't say she's proud to be a farmer. She tries to find a way in big society despite being a farmer. That's how I would describe it. At the same time, obviously, she loves her parents. She loves her grandparents. She really admires those people who work so hard, and her aunts and uncles in the village who still work as farmers. So she would never insult them. But at the same time, she just objectively feels that she doesn't have the network. If you're born in a city and your grandparents have been in a big city, they own a lot of houses from the time when houses were given to everyone in the city. So you're naturally rich. The people who built modern tech, you have like all the networks, and it's much easier with a big network to do something yourself. Whereas if you come from a farm, what you have is an attitude, like hardworking spirit, and an optimism because you've already come through a lot and seen yourself progress a lot in order to make it in a city. I think there's many different experiences in modern China, and they shaped the worldview of Chinese. And I think some Chinese may also just feel offended because of the way Vance said it. You can feel he intended it as an insult. And so people just feel like, who does he think he is to call us peasants when we build technologies which are superior to what the US can do? Without saying peasant is a bad thing, but without also accepting that every Chinese should be a peasant. These are different things.
Yeah, I think that you've actually encapsulated it very well there. My wife comes from what they would call a rural village, but it's in the middle of the Greater Bay Area. It's not rural at all anymore. Her home was, when she was growing up, farms. We were actually in an area yesterday morning. The day before, we stayed overnight in a place called Yako, which is a very original village here in Zhongshan. And it's never been developed. It's rice fields and planting. It's quite interesting because it's also the very last collective in China. There's only one collective village left in the whole of China, and it's in Zhongshan. So we got the opportunity to spend the night there, and we woke up in the morning, and all we heard at night was frogs, and we woke up in the morning to the sound of birds. And then we opened the windows, and it's just rice fields as far as the eye can see. And right over in the distance, there's a silhouette of Zhuhai, where you can see the high rises. And then the high-speed train goes past. Vroom. It's great to see this high-speed train, rice fields. And she grew up in an area very similar to that on the other side of town, also in Zhongshan. She doesn't consider herself rural, but her parents do. They live in the village. They call it the village still. It's a chun. It's not a town. It's a village.
Right. So no, I don't want to say Chinese use peasant as an insult. I don't think so. No. But what I compare it to is Switzerland is another extreme where people are very proud to be farmers, even if they just, have 3 chicken hens at home and eat their eggs from their own chicken and maybe, live in the countryside. They say, I'm a farmer too, and I'm a member of the Farmers Association, because Switzerland has this history of the farmers' revolution who kicked out the nobles from Germany, basically the founding myth of Switzerland. So we have this image of the farmer is like the nobility of Switzerland, and I think that's different. Again, it's different ways of what you hear when you hear the word farmer. And another thing is, I think that's very important, is Vance didn't say farmers, he said peasants, and that has a very strong feudal connotation, which is the peasant is the one that's owned by the feudal lord, right? It's not the farmer. The farmer is an independent landowner, and American farmers are very proud to till their own soil, to own the land that they work on and use their hands to make their wealth and all these myths. So farmer is a very positive word, but he uses peasant, which means basically a slave. I think that's another point that's very, very insulting, obviously.
That's nicely said, I think. Yeah, I agree with that. There's also another senator, I think, called Bill O'Reilly, who's been quite active recently about the tariffs. And his comment was, it's no good China dealing with places like Vietnam and Malaysia. They've got no money. We've got the money. We're the consumers. What do you think about that one as a comment?
Yes, that is such a typical arrogant Western view. And I know some Chinese share similar views, say there's no point in working with the third world because they don't have money. And it's just such a stupid point, because in the end, where does the money come from? It's coming either from selling resources or from producing things. How do you produce things? By educating your workforce and investing in industries. Now, China can do one thing, that's building up industries and infrastructure so people can work and use their skills to produce things. So people can get rich if they work with China. And on the other hand, if China helps countries to get rich, they not only get a new market with new customers, they also get a lot of goodwill. And that's exactly what I'm glad that the Chinese leadership and a lot of people who actually care about politics in China as well, they understand that China is absolutely right to work with these countries and absolutely can build up these countries. And just look at the numbers. I mean, Indonesia is huge. That's like 200 million people, and Vietnam is huge, and Philippines is huge. Now, some of them, there's still problems to work with them. Others are more open. Relations with Cambodia, Myanmar, Pakistan are definitely better than with Philippines, for example. But overall, ASEAN as an association is now flipping to say we'd rather have prosperity with China than ideological lectures from the US. And then in the end get slapped tariffs on. I mean, only a real absolute tool like the Philippine president, who really is in the hands of the US, would still prefer the US over China in such a situation. And there's no wonder that he delivers the previous president Duterte to the European courts to have him removed far away from the Philippines, because I'm sure he knows a majority of Filipinos would actually prefer to be independent. And that means doing trade with China rather than being so owned by the US and occupied by US troops. And so definitely China developing the global south gives China a lot of soft power while building up their new customer base, while also helping China outsource the types of work that Chinese may not be willing or able to do anymore, because some manual hard labor is just never going to produce a lot of value, and still some people would have to do it. And so it is actually very much wanted by the Chinese leadership to have that kind of industries move out to even poorer countries, because the Chinese workforce, I mean, just look at Chinese education throughout the countries.
Yeah.
Every Chinese child now gets a good education, at least to middle school level. And those people are not or are able to do much more than going in a sweatshop and do sewing or sewing shoes or sewing t-shirts. And so it makes sense that these kind of jobs are given to countries where the people do not have the basic education. And if those countries are smart, they also learn from China how to use the opportunity and not just have the people work for low value, for low wages, but also use the incomes generated to build up their country and follow a similar trajectory as China. So hopefully,
I think a lot of people don't realize the number of people in China who go to university. It's over 60% now, tertiary education. So some of those are going to vocational colleges. They're learning how to be woodworkers, bricklayers, electricians, plumbers, that kind of thing. But 60% of school leavers go on to some higher education, more than 60% now. And I think that may be the highest in the world right now. It was catching up to the US. The US is dropping because people can't afford it.
It's crazy. France probably also has a very high level because they lack the vocational training education, which in other countries I actually strongly support to say, like, if you want to fix cars as a job, or build buildings, road construction, there's no need to learn that at university, even though it needs a very dedicated skill set. But it makes sense to learn that on the job with school, besides learning and working. And China is experimenting with many forms of education because it's not for everyone to go through high school and then university. Some people are just more happy if they can use their hands to work. But yes, absolutely, Chinese education levels are rapidly increasing. And I think one reason that birth rates are so low at the moment is because the university rate has increased over the last 20 years from 20% to like 80%. And if you don't go to university, like in the 2000s, a lot of people born in the 80s, when they were 20, 25, they would be working on the job that they were going to work on for a very long time in their lives. So why not have a kid when you're 25? So by 2005, 2010, those people had kids. And then the people born in the 90s, now suddenly 80%, 60% go to university. Obviously, then when you're 25, you're just out of university. You need another 5 years to get settled in a job. Maybe have some savings. You're 30, 35, which means the people born in the 90s, they only just now reach a point in their life where they're ready to have children and think about getting married and think about having children. So there's this gap period where suddenly the education level jumped and the education duration jumped from 9 years to 12 and 15, 16 years with the bachelor degree. And I think within the next 5 years, probably the birth rate will come up again. Not to the levels it used to be, but I think I'm quite hopeful that the birth rates will come up again.
There's an interesting statistic came out just a few days ago that China's 2024 birth rate was 4 million higher than the year before. Now, having said that, 4 million is a very small amount inside of the scale of China, but it has increased already. So maybe they're also throwing incentives at people to have children, and there's maternity leave, all kinds of really good incentives for ladies who have their baby, then go back to the workplace. And it's happening. It is actually increasing. I'm not even sure that's a great idea with automation and robotics coming in, but hey, this is something that economists say we need it. China is doing it. China's delivering.
Yeah, I also saw the number 500,000 more in the last year, and I agree. The Year of the Dragon will be part of that. I just know for a fact some people would wait 1 year longer in order to give birth in the Year of the Dragon, and the Year of the Snake is also quite popular compared to maybe a sheep,
or a rabbit.
Or a rabbit, even though they're nice and friendly people, but people just love the dragon.
You want
character.
people a little more aggressive, but I mean, dragons are not aggressive; they're lucky and good things to have around. Yeah, very different to the British dragon, which and there's a thing. Britain has its whole mythology based around something which didn't exist. Saint George, the patron saint of Britain, is a saint because he killed a dragon. Oh, come on!
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, we're getting towards the end. That's the topics that we were going to talk about. We're going to talk about the respect and the tariffs and the your Xpeng show. Is there anything else you want to bring up before we finalize?
I just want to quickly look at some of the comments. I think there's really a lot of interesting comments, and just not to miss any good ones. Yeah, vocational training is indeed great. I totally agree. And yes, the trip of Xi Jinping to Malaysia and Vietnam was, I think, very successful compared to the Japanese trip to the US. Yeah.
I don't know what Derek Martin is doing. No student. Derek doesn't seem to be related to this. Dark Sun went to catch his dinner. It is dinner time in China, or Chinese people would eat dinner at 6 o'clock, and it is 6 o'clock, and your wife's probably waiting for you too. Mainland Chinese descendant. This was a nice comment. Proud to be descended, to show how far they have achieved. And I think PL22 is Chinese in Malaysia, I think he said later. Yeah, he's in Malaysia. Yeah, that no money comment went viral and pissed off many Malaysians. Yes, so yeah, TikTok is full of Malaysian people throwing money.
I mean, Petronas is a big company. Kuala Lumpur is a very modern city. They had this huge corruption scandal with the one MDB, the big state fund of Malaysia. But, that was a huge fund. And so that shows that Malaysia does have a lot of money. Otherwise, how could it have such a big fund to be corrupt in? And so, yes, Malaysia has rich people. Vietnam is a booming economy, obviously. So yes, the assumption that the US was rich anyway, I mean, there's 20% of Americans who are rich, and there's 80% who somehow survive, and of those, the bottom 50% have a really hard time. So I don't think it's not 350 million Americans all are great spenders.
Yeah,
it's just in the US.
When you look at the GDP of America and you look at the top 10 people who've got control of that much money, it's well, not that much money, not the whole GDP, but certainly. I was looking, I've been watching the figures for poverty, and every single year in America, it actually increases. It went down for a while, but before COVID, it started to increase. During COVID, it increased, and it's now sitting over 13%. And the number of homeless is increasing a lot. The number of people they say they've actually invented a new word called vehicular residents. These are people who don't have a home, but they're not homeless. They're living in their cars.
Yeah, insane. And the comment of, sorry for butchering the name, I think it's Kyler Bleeker. Is that the name? Why has China still not restricted exports of 4-piperidone? So I assume these are like precursors to produce fentanyl, to which, to my knowledge, these precursors also used to produce regular medicine, and it's
every single product that is recognized as a component of fentanyl is controlled. Every single product, and that was done in conjunction with the Drug Enforcement Agency, who have an office in Shanghai and have an office in Guangzhou, or they did until quite recently. China has worked with America, with the United States, successfully, convincingly, and they have now, China now has the world's strongest restrictions and controls on anything to do with illicit drugs, by far eclipsing anything America has done. So I don't know what piperidone or 1-BOC piper, I don't know what they are, but if they're related to the production of fentanyl, they are controlled. If they're not related to the production of fentanyl, or if people think they are, then the DEA needs to talk to their opposite numbers. And here's another thing. I don't know many people realize this. I did a video about this a while ago. The Drug Enforcement Agency and the drug police in China have daily hookups, where they talk to each other and brief each other on what's going on. This has been going on for years, and it does still happen. So what China put out a white paper, and Kyla, is that Kyla? I'm not sure, but you need to go look at, and you can find this, China's white paper on fentanyl production, and it will tell you what China has done. I did a video on it about 3 months ago when the paper was first released, maybe 2 months ago, but it wasn't that long ago. I took the paper and I looked at the salient points of it, and I went through every single point in there that China are doing. And there's nowhere in America that tells you what China are doing. They just make up their own rules and lies about it.
Right. Yeah. I was going to go another direction too. Yeah. I mean, the precursors of fentanyl are used in regular medicine, and it's only the US that has a fentanyl problem. There's no fentanyl issue in China. There's not even a fentanyl issue in Mexico. So ask yourself, why does the US have a problem with it? And the other point is, last time China and the West had an issue with drugs, it was China trying to make opium illegal, and the West's answer was to invade China to force open the trade with opium. So if anything, if we repeat history, then China should attack the US for not allowing Chinese companies to produce fentanyl and sell it to the Americans who want to buy it. So if we go by history,
and it's not China deliberately doing this. China just arrested it said a foreign national. It didn't say what country they came from, but a person, a male, coming through Beijing's new capital airport, and had inside of his stomach 1.65 kilograms of cocaine in small packages inside the stomach. That's 1.5 kilograms. That guy's going to the execution chamber very soon. There's no question about that. But didn't say where he came from.
Yeah, Francis Tango asked, what's my content about China or Carl, and what's your video? So actually, I had some videos up long ago. I haven't done videos in a long time. I'm mostly on Twitter, and mostly about China, and some world politics as well, which I don't think we want to discuss on this channel. I do also Douyin. So that's Chinese social media where I do short takes on mostly on Europe, on world politics as well. And that's actually the one that works the best. I think it's easier to get.
Do you do that in Chinese, on Chinese social media? Yeah, I thought you did.
Yes, I do speak Chinese, and I do in Chinese. It's called 来自瑞士的胡海文. So literally translated.
Sorry, you're breaking up a little bit there. Can you put into the comments section what that is? The name of your Chinese site?
I haven't opened it. Let me see how I can.
You can put it into private comments, and I can cut and paste.
I send it to you. Sorry.
Private.
Now you will have my fingers fly over my keyboard because my Huawei laptop has the camera integrated in the keyboard. So just for people to know why I have the spider fingers here.
And I will put up Harald's Chinese. So a lot of people don't have Twitter. Only YouTube.
So, I understand. I really didn't feel the need to now also go to Mastodon, or what it's called, and Blue Sky and all the new ones. I understand people don't like Musk. I'm not saying I like him, but I just never felt that I would have to also change social media
So there you
because of
go.
that.
For anybody who reads and writes Chinese, there it is. That's
Yeah.
Harald in China.
And you find me on WeChat video and on Douyin with this handle.
Douyin. Okay. So, are you sending me another one?
Not sending you like last.
I have no idea what this means, Barry. People are painting their building green. I haven't seen anyone painting the building. I painted mine white. My apartment is known locally as the White House, which I thought was kind of funny.
What I can think of as regarding the color green was that weird story of that one city that made it illegal to have any red signs on stores and shops, and all the shops had changed to green signs, and ultimately the citizens rebelled and said they don't accept it, and then the national government said this law is unacceptable. So that was a weird story.
But kind of wants red.
So very simple. Most people, at least in the cities, do not own entire houses, but just own an apartment. So you wouldn't be able to paint your apartment outside. And if you paint it inside for green, I don't think anyone cares. So it's not really a protest. No. The only place where you can choose the color of the outside of the building you live in is basically in villages, and I haven't heard any villages. Why would green be a protest?
I don't know.
Green is typically
I'm starting in 3 weeks' time. I'm starting another bike ride. I'm going to go across China from the south to the north. I will be looking out through the countryside for buildings that have recently, because you can tell if they've recently been painted green. And if I find one, I promise I'm going to do this. If I find one, I'll go and knock on the door and say, "Why did you paint your house green?" I've never heard of it. I don't know anything about it. If there's usually these propagandists have no idea. They don't live in China. They don't spend time in China. I don't watch any of those, so I don't get to hear about them except through comments like Barry's comment there.
And just another regarding color green, typically if a sign is green color, especially if it's a restaurant, then it means it's a Muslim restaurant. So the Muslim restaurants by tradition have green signs, whereas other restaurants typically have red signs.
Do you know something? Until you said that, I didn't realize that, but that's absolutely true. I had no idea that was true, but you're right. Yeah. They usually have a picture of a green field with sheep wandering on it. But yes.
Also, so either it's Hui or Uyghur Chinese.
I'll bet you someone in the comments is thinking, what about if you wear a green hat?
That is a sign of being cheated. It's just a saying that if you say the guy has a green hat, it means that his cheated
wife or girlfriend is cheating on him. Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't wear a green hat in China.
Green hats are not selling well on Taobao.
Yeah, there he goes.
Oh, Kyler is pronounced Kyler. Thanks for the clarification.
The other thing was that I was told this by a student who cut all of her hair very, very short. One day I said, "Oh, why did you cut your hair? You had such lovely hair." And she said, "My boyfriend broke up with me, so I cut my hair." Why?
All right.
Because that's what we do in China. Okay. And I've heard of it since, but it's not a common thing. But if you see a long-haired girl suddenly with short hair, it's possible she's just broken up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, cutting your hair, I used to have long hair, and I would sometimes cut it when I was in a bad mood situation. So it's kind of making a change, without getting a stupid tattoo. That
I can see you with long hair. You're a little bit of a hippie there with your long hair. I once had long hair too, but I was only 15 years old, and it was in 1973 and 4. I had shoulder length hair, and I listened to heavy metal music. That was my form of protest. Okay, it is time now to join our respective wives and families for dinner. So I would like to thank everybody for joining us. The good questions. It was a nice chat, a lot of fun, and we will. Harald and I plan to do this quite frequently. It'll be about maybe not once a month, because for the next month I'm going to be doing a lot of traveling. But we'll do this 4 or 5 times a year, I think. is the way to do it.
Yeah,
And
whenever
keep it fun.
there's a topic to talk about,
Yeah.
I'm happy to join here.
All right, great. And thank you very much, Harald, for joining us and talking about your expertise on
Thanks
the
for
great
having me,
threats
and
of
thanks
China.
everyone in the chat also from my side. It was very interesting to talk to you guys, and
Great, some
great
good
talking to you.
questions.